Doc Fletcher talking about canoeing and kayaking on Michigan waterways. Doc's been here, and last time was in 2009.
That's
so
right.
Welcome back.
Yep. You were busy remodeling this building, and we were over on 31 at, was it a grocery store or a drugstore? Okay.
It started out life, I think, as a Kmart, and then turned itself into a grocery store, and now it's empty. So, welcome back.
Thank you.
Doc has written a bunch of books, and several are up here. They'll be available for purchase
Absolutely.
afterward. The autograph is free.
Yes. Yeah.
No extra charge.
Yeah.
So, let me ask you to help put your hands together and welcome Doc Fletcher.
Thank you very much. The first river I'm going to talk about today from the book is on the western shoreline a little north of here. It's the north branch of the Pentwater River. And you can see that it's a river that's friendly to both paddlers and puppies. I would categorize the north branch of the Pentwater as easy, shallow, and a lazy kind of fun. It's a short river. It only runs for 3 miles. And it was the river that took the least amount of time for any of the 20 I wrote about in the book, 1 hour and 20 minutes. Great wildlife on this river, too. Eagles circled overhead as we paddled down the river. And just before the big south branch merged with the north branch, we were paddling by tall reeds on our left, and there was a lot of rustling going on in there, and suddenly a crane lifted its head above the reeds, no more than 20 feet away from us, spread out those big wings, and took flight. My camera was not fast enough to get the crane, so instead you have a puppy to look at. This shallow or short river, I should say, has its beginnings just on the eastern edge of the town of Pentwater and at Hammett Road. And from the Hammett Road access, it flows in a southerly direction, a very gentle meander, just about 10 minutes to the east of Lake Michigan. Hour and 20 minutes on the river. The first hour, it flows through a very shallow riverbed that's anywhere from bottom scraping to a foot deep, and a very narrow riverbed, anywhere from 8 feet to 20 feet wide. But then with about, this unfortunately is going to happen a few times, it's trying to download some system, and I'm not agreeing to do that right now. So the first hour, shallow and narrow, but when that big south branch comes in and merges, a tremendous amount of volume is added to this narrow river, so much so that suddenly it's 50 feet, 75 feet, 100 feet wide. What you're looking at in this picture is the last few feet in the foreground of the north branch of the Pentwater. You paddle beneath that bridge, and that's called the Long Bridge Road Bridge. Just past it, right on the left, there's a little dirt takeout. Now, if after 1 hour and 20 minutes, maybe that's not enough time for you out in the water, you can continue past the bridge. Now you're in Pentwater Lake. You can paddle across the lake and take out at the municipal boat ramp in town. But keep in mind that once you're out on the lake, you no longer have a current behind you. You are the one who is supplying the power. So to get across the lake, it would take 40 minutes if you were paddling. And if you weren't paddling, it would take forever. And Pentwater outfitters might charge you a little more money for their equipment. We're going to leave the lower peninsula for our next river. We're going to cross over the Mackinac Bridge and take a trip down one of the more challenging rivers for the book, the Carp River. And it's a section of the Carp that's about 15 minutes north of St. Ignace. St. Ignace is where this view was taken from. It was taken from the heights of Father Marquette National Memorial. Looking south, St. Ignace was founded, it was one of the earliest European settlements in the entire Midwest, the second earliest settlement, founded in 1671 by Father Marquette and his fellow Jesuits. And it was named after St. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, also known as Society of Jesus. That was in 1671. 2 years after that, one of the greatest adventures in the history of our country took place right along the shoreline here where St. Ignace meets Lake Michigan. It was right there where Father Marquette, Joliet or Joly, who knows the history on that, the great French explorer. We'll go with Joliet, why not? We'll massacre the French language. They and their small party put 2 birch bark canoes in the water right here, and they hung a right. And they flowed west along the northernmost edge of Lake Michigan and followed as it curved down to the southwest, taking it down into Green Bay, the body of water, not where the Packers play. At the bottom of Green Bay, they were able to pick up the river mouth of the Fox River in Wisconsin, follow that as it flowed, well, against the current, I should say, as it goes southwest, cutting across what would become latter-day Wisconsin, picking up in the middle of Wisconsin, the Wisconsin River. Now the current's at their back, and they took that all the way down to the mighty Mississippi. In southwestmost Wisconsin, right where the Mississippi forms the border between Iowa to the west and Wisconsin to the east. Not satisfied with having gone that far, they continued south on the Mississippi past latter-day St. Louis and Memphis, all the way down to the river mouth of the Arkansas River. Before they turned around and retraced their steps, they were in uncharted wilderness for 4 months, with not a single night at a Hampton Inn, 2,000 miles of rivers and lakes. While they were out there, they charted the Mississippi, the first Europeans to chart the Mississippi, to map it. And they were able to show everybody that there's a water highway that will take you from northernmost Lake Michigan all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. 2,000 miles of rivers and lakes. And while we're out there, we'll map the Mississippi. I, on the other hand, once paddled 3 miles down the Mississippi, and then I retired to a bar for a burger and a beer. And I will accept the success found in smaller victories. So, it was a very good burger. So let's get back to why we crossed the bridge, which was not for a history lesson, but rather to paddle down the beautiful Carp River. The Carp flows in a southeasterly direction for 45 miles. It has its beginnings way off the left of the screen, and it ends way off the right of the screen. It starts at Trout Lake, and from there it flows down into an area to where it begins to be called the Carp River Canoe Trail. That's the last 25 miles of the 45-mile-long river, and it ends way out on the other side of the screen in St. Martin Bay, in northernmost Lake Huron. For the book, again, I don't write about the whole river, but we picked a 6-mile segment that begins at East Lake Road, following the southeast flowing current through some fine rapids, and taking out at the Carp River Campground. Now, our group of paddling buddies unanimously agreed that the Carp River was one of the all-time favorite trips they were ever on. There are frequent rapids that you encounter, Class 1s, but a few Class 2s. Normally they run 5 to 6 minutes long. The river is clear, it's clean. The beautiful reddish, dark reddish-brown color is from tannic acid emitting from riverside vegetation decay. A lot of rapids runs, and some of them run through areas pretty thick with obstructions. But despite how it looked here, there was not a single time we had to portage on a 6-mile trip. The 6 miles, by the way, took us 2 hours and 12 minutes. Even here, there was a few openings that you could maneuver around. Because of the frequent deadwood, it's not a river for beginners. 2 to 3 feet deep. It varies from 20 to 40 feet wide. In the last hour of the 2-hour trip, there's quite a few little sandy beaches where you can pull the boat over, get out and stretch your legs before getting back in to tackle the next set of rapids. A wonderful trip for people who are experienced. This is one of the few peaceful scenes we took all day going down the river. So again, a 15 minutes north of St. Ignace, wonderful stretch of the Carp. Now we'll come back down to the Lower Peninsula for our next river. This is one that's most frequently identified with Michigan State University, and is the Red Cedar River. The Red Cedar also flows for 45 miles, but instead of like the Carp flowing southeast, this one flows west. It has its beginnings east of Lansing in Williamston. That's where its headwaters form. And from there it flows through Okemos, through East Lansing, through Lansing, and off the screen here, it empties into the Grand River, one of the major feeder rivers for the Grand. Of the 45 miles, we're going to paddle on 10.6 miles. We're going to start east of Okemos at Van Atta Road in a place called Lake Park, paddle through the heart of the MSU campus, and just past Aurelius Road, there's a little canoe landing on the left called Kruger's Landing, and that's where we're going to take out. Now, these are the rapids. One of the rapids runs on the Red Cedar. They're right by the administration building at MSU, and we'll get back to those a little later. In 1855, the state legislature authorized the building of a college along the banks of the Red Cedar that taught scientific agriculture, originally called the State Agricultural College, later Michigan State College, and today MSU. Scenes like this one of college students studying or just relaxing along the shore have played out ever since that 1855 founding. Now back then, the campus was only a small clearing in the great Michigan forest. MSU has had a friendly and sometimes not so friendly rivalry with the folks in Ann Arbor for over 150 years now. Some people just can't let go. I'm sorry, I really couldn't resist that. Now, where we started from, which is a little east of Okemos, you were paddling through wilderness area that had very little in common versus the part of the Red Cedar that flows through the MSU campus. There's almost no sun coming through because there's so many trees along both shorelines, leaning in from both shores, forming a canopy over your head, and a fair amount of trees that are midstream, plus a lot of deadwood. There's a lot of log jams in general in the first hour, but not so much that you can't paddle your way through. In my books, I always put in key landmarks along the way that kind of act as your clock on the water. So on this 10.6 mile trip that took 3 hours and 15 minutes, you'll know you're 1 hour into the trip, about the 1/3 point when you hit the Okemos Road Bridge. The river in the early beginnings already has quite a bayou feel to it, but it was enhanced by the fact that we took our trip in mid-May, springtime, when the water levels are generally higher, plus we went 4 days after 3 inches of rain fell, so it was a little faster than normal. The miles don't change, but the minutes do. One of the key landmarks was also a bit of a challenge to get around. You'll know you're 5 miles into the trip when you come upon a huge log jam. One of these log jams that looks like it's not going anywhere for a while. And fabulous rapids run around the right and the left. But some of those rapids have deadwood in them. Jimmy Gretzinger, the co-host of Michigan Out of Doors, he lives in Williamston, so this is his home river. So he and his wife Dana joined us on the trip. She was so excited she joined us even after flipping. She said that it was a soft tip, kind of like, I guess I'm going in. And next thing she knew, she was in the water, and Jimmy, being gallant, pulled over and helped her in. Now, as soon as you paddle beneath the Hagedorn Road Bridge, you're 6.3 miles into the 10.6 mile trip, and that also marks the beginning of the Michigan State University campus property, Hagedorn Road Bridge. A little bit further from that, you go underneath the Farm Lane Road Bridge, and when you hit Farm Lane Road Bridge, you're starting to hear a dull roar downstream. Well, that dull roar, you can't see where it's coming from, but you can definitely hear it, and that is the rapids at the MSU administration building. These rapids are brief, but they are vicious. As soon as you hit them, you are slammed down into a very rocky bottom that tries to spin you and flip you out. My suggestion would be just before you hit these rapids, there is a nice takeout point on the left. It's elevated ground. You can take a look and decide, do I want to do this? If you don't, there's a great portage along the left bank. You can walk your boat down and get back in. Now, on this particular day, I was not practicing what I preached. 3 of our boats got off. 1 canoe in front of me stayed on, and I said, why not? And joined them for the ride. Oops. As they hit the end of the rapids, or the beginning of the rapids, they disappeared from my sight, which I took as a bad sign. What I took as an even worse sign is I then looked to both shores, and the students had stopped walking and were aiming their phone at me. Sure enough, I hit the rapids. It spun me, tried to flip me. It wasn't able to. Both boats made it through fine. But one of my buddies said a year or 2 before I went, he had gone through these rapids. It flipped the boat over, flipped him over, and he was separated from the boat a while, and all his other friends could see in their boats was these 2 legs bobbing down the river about 40 feet before he was able to get back in. Now, we went in the springtime. In the summertime, in normal depth conditions, it's so shallow here that you can't paddle through. Right in the middle of the river, it's just almost a dirt bottom, and then a little bit of water trickles around the right and left. This same guy who flipped over when he was a student at MSU, he made a little money on the side. He would put tables and chairs on this area, and people would bring their dates out there, and he'd have candlelight out and play the guitar, and said it was a pretty good date for some folks. So anyways. Now this is 7.5 miles into the trip, so you're not too far from the end now. You go downstream, you pass the main library, you pass Spartan Stadium, past the trees on the left, pretty cool. You go by Breslin Center, and after you go under the Harrison Road Bridge, you come up to the Kalamazoo Road Bridge. That's 25 minutes from the takeout at Aurelius Road, and you may decide by that point that you have built up a bit of a thirst and a hunger. You can pull over there because you're right at the Lansing Riverwalk. And less than a 5-minute walk to your right, you will come to one of my favorite pubs in the entire state, Dagwood's Bar.